Hi, I'm Jo from J.H.Leather, and it has been a hot minute since I've actually put out a video. I was just looking back on YouTube, and the last video that I put out was actually right at the very end of October. And so I thought I should probably address why that was. One thing, coming into that time of year, Christmas is my busiest time of year, and that does kick off in sort of the middle of November right up until Christmas. So that is always a struggle for me to fit in videos around making all the orders. If you saw or you follow me on Instagram, I did put a few stories out, and I think the busiest week I had about 25 orders come in that I had to get out that week. So it is pretty full on. So it is a struggle coming up with ideas every single month for a new make-along video, and that is something that I have really been struggling with. I've been doing the make-alongs for a good few years now, so I don't want to go back and just remake similar things every single year. I want to come up with new stuff, but it is, like I said, quite hard coming up with those ideas. So having a bit of a break is sort of quite good for me, so I can de-stress from making the videos and also sort of recharge and sort of come up with some more ideas for you all. So another reason that I haven't been posting as much is that it has been quite disheartening, the amount of views the videos are getting. And I think part of that is down to me not posting as much as what I was. But also the YouTube algorithm is a very strange thing to get on your side, and I feel if you're on the wrong side of it, it just doesn't push your videos. And an example of that is that last video that I put out back at the very end of October has only got 5,000 views, which is quite disheartening because it took me about a week to actually get that video together. It was about 2 days doing the prototype, 2 days of filming, and then another day of editing and doing all the behind the scenes stuff. And so for it to be sitting on 5,000 views sort of 3 or so months later, that is quite hard. And I know I shouldn't get all caught up in the analytics of it all, but when you put a whole week of effort into one video to get that few views, it really is quite disheartening. Now I do feel that after having this extended break, I am ready to come back and make some more videos for you all. And I'm still going to try and do one video a month on the make-alongs, but then also I've been trying to brainstorm ideas as to what I can do for a second video a month as and when I can fit them in, which could be anything from like a Q&A video, some skills videos, and sort of not totally related to making a specific item, tool reviews, and hopefully if I can fit it in and I can find some willing people, I would like to go and sort of interview other crafters within the grander leather crafting sort of community, as it were. So sort of saddlers and bridle makers down to like the tool makers, the leather merchants and the tanneries and all of that. So, because I think that'd be quite interesting, not only for me to sort of go and see the people who I sort of speak with online and sort of am a customer of, but also just to share with you all what goes on in sort of that sense of the thing as well. So I am, like I said, I am quite keen to come back now. I've got lots of ideas on the way. So hopefully this will be the first of many videos to follow this year. To kick things off and to make this video a little bit longer, what I thought we would do is put one of my ideas into practice and do a bit of a Q&A. So if you follow me on Instagram, you would have seen that I put an Instagram story out asking for your questions, and I also put a question out in the Discord channel as well for you to submit your questions. So we're going to go through a few of them now. The first one is from Si, the Yorkshire guy, who uses the same dye or powder dye and wallpaper paste sort of stain method as I do, but wants to know how I seal it. And so what I actually do is I use Tolkanol. And Tolkanol is just brilliant. If you haven't used it, it's hard to describe it. When I remember when I first used it, it was sort of like having magic in a bottle. You just sort of put it on and you've got to let it so it goes sort of half dry to get the best results. and then you can burnish it in as normal. And the difference it makes, so if you feel it on sort of an edge that you haven't done and then the edge you have done, it's just different. So it really is, like I said, magic in a bottle. So if you haven't already, you want to get yourself some Tokonol for your edge burnishing. On a similar line as that, this artisan man has asked where I source the black powder dye from, and I get that from Abbey, England. Now that one is slightly different to the dark Havana and the golden brown they have, in that it does have a little bit of glue actually mixed in with the powder, or at least the batch that I got last does. So you might not need to add as much glue to that, and I will leave a link in the description if you're interested in getting your own powdered dye, as well as link to the video where I show you how to make it up. Another one from John, this artisan man on Instagram, who has asked, what leather would you recommend for belts and thicknesses? Now that does depend on what sort of belt it is you're making. So for me, if I'm making a plain sort of just a standard belt, then I'm going to go for a butt, and I generally lean towards the bridle butts because I really like the finish on them. They're a bit more shiny than sort of a standard butt, as it were, or a non-bridal butt. And the benefit of the butts is that you've got that extra length there. You're not necessarily going to need it all the time. However, if you do need to make a bit of a longer belt, having the bridle butt is just ideal for that, because they're roughly about, like, you're going to have about 60 inches of workable area in sort of like the longest part, maybe a little bit more. So they are a really good leather, and I get the 3 to 3.5 millimeter thickness ones. Another question on Instagram, and that is, I struggle to know what leather to buy for a project. Is there a rule of thumb, e.g. shoulder, etc.? Now, again, that depends entirely on what it is you're making. What I tend to do is, well, I've got the benefit of having done this for many, many years. So I've got a good idea as to what I want to use for what project. And it depends, like I said, what it is you're making. If you're going after sort of strength and you're doing a lot of straps and stuff like that, then butts are really good because they're strong and they are long. For things like bags, again, it depends on the bag. If you wanted a vegetable town bag, then shoulder is really good in about the 2 to 2.5 mil range for the smaller ones. And if you're making a satchel, then you could go slightly thicker. For wallets and things, then I like to actually use pigskin. I love pigskin. And that's about 1 to 1.5 mil thick, and then you can split it down should you need to. So, I mean, it's hard to sort of say because it depends entirely on what it is you're going to make and what you want the final products to be like. Because again, you've got the sort of vegetable tan leathers and chrome tan leathers, and they're going to give you completely different finishes, even if they were the same thickness. So I would say to that, it depends what you want your final item to look like, and then you can work backwards from that. So if you wanted a tote bag, say, but you wanted it to be like nice and soft, then maybe looking at a chrome tan leather would be a better option. And you can look online because there's loads of like different videos and stuff online and blogs and stuff which can have sort of key insights in there for you which can help. But yes, that's a hard one to answer in a Q&A without the context of what it is you're looking to make. But hopefully my answer has been helpful. Okay, so this one is from Oten Will, I'm sorry if that is not how you say your name, on Instagram, who has asked, can you make a reasonable wage from selling Leathercraft goods? And that again is a tough one to answer. If you are down to put in the work and the graft to build up your business, then yes, I believe you can make a good wage doing Leathercraft. This is my pretty much but my main source of income that I get is from doing my Leathercraft. And I've been doing this, like I said, for quite a few years now. So it is doable, but it is quite a lot of graft that you're going to have to put in. So if you're doing it part-time, like on the side at the moment, keep doing that until it's making enough money for you to actually take the plunge and go full-time into your craft. Yeah, again, sorry it's not more of an in-depth video, but I question or answer, but I do feel like you can make a reasonable wage from selling your leather goods, but it will take a lot of effort to get to that point. Okay, another one now on Instagram from Frank's Jacket. And that is, what is your process for creating patterns? Now, I've had a few different processes over the years, but for the time being, or for mostly what I'm doing now, I have two methods. So if it's for wallets, then I can pretty much do that all on Adobe Illustrator now, because I know roughly what sizes I want from all the wallet designs that I've already done previously. And so I can open all the other designs and work out what sizes that I want for the new design just in Illustrator, and without having to actually physically like use anything in terms of leather and that for the actual patterns. And then what I'll do is I will then test them out. So I'll print them, make a testing, and then make any changes to the patterns as I go. Make sure I note them down, and then I can put them back into Illustrator with any changes that I have made. Now, if you don't use Adobe Illustrator, what you can do is pretty much do the same thing, but with paper patterns. Now, the best way to do that is actually get yourself some graph paper and glue that onto some card. So you've got a little bit of reinforcement there, and then you can sort of go about cutting out your patterns from there, and you know they're going to be symmetrical because you're going to have like the lines and on the graph paper that you can follow. Now, for larger items, so for a bag, if I'm creating a new bag, I would do a similar method. And what I'll actually do is then sort of take the patterns that I think are going to work, and I'll make a full-size mock-up out of cards. So if I'm doing the card patterns, I can use those. And then depending on what it is, I will also use sort of like a substitute leather, so either split hides, or I actually have some vinyl, which if I'm like, so if you were going to be making a soft bag, as it were, you can replicate that with vinyl, which is much cheaper, and it's sort of the same to make sure your patterns work. And that's what I did when I made my first weekend bag. And yes, there will be the weekend bag make this year, because currently I only have a pair of handles and the bag that I make is going to be mine. So yeah, I mean, that's sort of my process for it. If it's small, and I know, like I said, I've been lucky enough that I've been doing this for a long time, so I can do a lot of stuff measurements wise in my head and translate that on to Adobe Illustrator. But for more complex things, if I haven't made it before, or larger items, then making a paper pattern and making sure you use that graph paper is a really good idea. So we've got John, this artisan man, coming in with a really hard-hitting question. Please do a video on making a leather tang card, or a jack as they are known. Well, John, I've never made a leather tang card before, so if I can figure out how to make one, then I'll make the video, but I wouldn't hold out any hopes for this year, because that's going to be quite an in-depth undertaking for me. Okay, and our last Instagram question is from Dr. Doolittle, and he has asked, Joe, are you still planning on creating a book about making different kinds of dog collars and leads? Now, I mentioned that quite a while ago on my podcast, which has taken a back seat for the time being, just because time and views and stuff. And it's still an idea. I'm just a bit dubious as to how popular that would be. So maybe you guys can give me some feedback. If you are interested in an sort of in-depth dog collar and lead making guide as a book, would you be interested in buying it? So let me know in the comments, and we'll use that as some market research to see if I did make a book, how popular it would actually be. On to Discord, we've got some questions as well. So from Wyvern, oh no, it's a tongue twister. Wyvern Wing Leathercraft. How do you care for your leather products? And what about for leather that you haven't used yet and is just waiting in the shop? So for looking after my leather products, I like to use a natural leather balm. And the one that I actually use most here in the workshop is the original leather care product from Sedgwick's Leather. And I like that because it's literally, like I said, it's a natural one. It's just beeswax and fats and tallows, and it's really nice for feeding the leather. Now, if you've got some leather that's come in and it's a bit bleh, you can use some warm water, not hot water, warm water, and rub off any mud and icky stuff with a soft cloth or a sponge. And once that's naturally dried, you can then feed the leather with your sort of natural leather care product. As for the leather stock that I have in, generally I do go through leather quite a lot, and I'll only order in what I need, and then when that's run out, I'll order it again. So I don't have too much in the way of stuff sitting around, although I'm saying that and I can see actually I have a lot of leather over there. But in general, I don't really do too much to it. It is kept out of direct sunlight and away from all heat sources, so it's not likely to dry out or anything like that. But what I will do is, once I've made up whatever it is I am making with it, then I will use my leather care and just give it a good feed before it goes out to the customers. So we've got a really good question here now. So of all your many skills in Leathercraft, what was the hardest one to master? Now, there have been quite a few, but I think at the top of that list, it's got to be edge paint. I really struggle with edge paint, and part of that is due to me being impatient and still getting used to using it. So it is something that I am still working on, and it is quite hard. I can't blame the workshop for everything, but it is incredibly cold in this workshop, so it takes an awful long time for the edge paint that I use to actually dry so I can sand it and then apply another layer. But yeah, I think for sure edge paint has definitely been the hardest thing so far. There might be some more that's harder, but yeah, edge paint has been quite a testing experience to go through. We've got some nice questions coming in from Mill Creek Leather on Discord. And so I'm going to go through as many of these as I can because they're really good questions. So, oil before or after you dye. Now, I'm assuming that that's going to be related to using sort of like a natural leather that you're dyeing yourself, which isn't something that I actually do. So if it's based on that, I can't really answer that question for you. I don't dye my own leathers. But in terms of like oiling, I don't really oil stuff. I will use the leather feed, like I said, and I will do that after I've made the whole product up. So I'm not sure if that's the best answer for you, but that's the one that I'm going to give. So when did you start out in your own leatherwork? And I did actually also get asked by another person on here, how did I get into Leathercraft? So I'll give you the brief breakdown. But for the more in-depth one, I do have a podcast episode. The first ever podcast that I did was about the history of J.H.Leather, and I'll link to that in the description. But I basically started out when I was 18, many moons ago. I did a 2-year full-time course, and I then went on and did a 3-year apprenticeship where I stayed on for a further year before moving up here to Wales to start my own business. And I've been doing that. It will be 11 years this summer. So yes, quite a while. So expensive tools versus starter tools and when to upgrade. Now, this is probably going to be worth doing a more in-depth video on. But for the brief answer to that is, starter tools are great, obviously, for when you're starting out, because you might not actually like leatherwork, and if you've not like broken the bank, then it's not the biggest mistake or the biggest problem in the world. And then in terms of upgrading, it's just as and when you feel you are being limited by your tools, I would say. So if you're doing a lot more crafting, if you've really got into it and you're finding that actually the pricking irons that you've got with your beginner set aren't up to scratch, then would be the time to upgrade to something more expensive. Zippers, best way to apply and what brands to look for. So brand wise, I like the Riri zippers, and in the UK you can get them from Leather Trimmings UK. I think I'll leave a link in the description. So I like the Riri zippers. They're really quite nice actually. So they are the ones that I prefer to use. And best way to apply the zippers. So it depends entirely on what it is you're making as to how the zip's going to fit into it. I do have a zipper tool, which is sort of like a bit of a brass tool, which has sort of guides on it so you can glue up to it, and you can use that as a reference for when you're gluing it into your leather. Outside of that, you can also use double-sided tape is a great way to stick the zip down without having to go through the mess of glue. But I think maybe zippers might be a good one to do a bit of a deep dive on, and I could do a whole video on fitting zippers into sort of different bits of leather and sort of in sort of different methods. That might be quite a nice one actually. When to use stitching awls or stitch punches. So I'm going to assume stitch punches is actually a stitching chisel that are made to go all the way through the leather versus using a pricking iron where you would then have to use an awl to actually make the holes. So in terms of when to use one over the other, that does depend on what you are making. So for smaller items such as sort of where you're using thinner leathers like key rings, wallets and card holders and stuff, I mean, to be fair, your pricking iron is probably going to go all the way through anyway if you're using some really thin stuff. And you can use either or. However, when it comes onto stitching thicker stuff, so dog collars and belts and sort of certain bags and things, then you're going to be using your stitching awl because your pricking irons or your stitching chisels just won't go all the way through. So on a belt, for example, if you were doing a turn, so fitting the buckle on, and you're using the bridle butt like what I use, you're going to have sort of about 6 mil of leather there. So your stitching chisels just aren't going to go through. And while there are ways that you can sort of line them up and then punch them on both sides and stuff, it's worth using an awl for that because it's quicker for, I feel, and it's just going to make things a bit easier than having to line everything up every single time you want to make a certain thing. If you can get your head around using an awl, use an awl. So that is about all the questions that we're going to go over today. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and if you did, please remember to like and subscribe for more videos because they are coming soon.